So my name is Trey Sherrell. I'm an environmental and regulatory compliance consultant to the cannabis industry. My background is in forest hydrology. I've worked for the Central Valley Water Board and the timber program. That's how I got my start with the water board. And then I worked more recently with the cannabis cultivation waste discharge regulatory program. And then 3 months ago, I left the water board and now I'm a consultant. The statewide general order, it was supposed to be released June 14th. It was not until Friday, but we have it now. It's currently in a 60-day comment period, so you can pour through it and provide your insight to the State Water Resources Control Board. But I'm going to go over basically the tenets of it, an overarching view, and then I'll answer any specific questions you have. Like I said, we've only had it since Friday to look at, but this is going to be the water board permit that's going to, it was mandated by the California legislature that this permit be developed and this policy package be developed, and then it's a requirement for licensure, and it's going to be in existence and requirement for licensure into perpetuity, pretty much. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the current Central Valley General Order. There's 3 tiers right now. You guys familiar with the tier system? Well, they've changed the tiers up a little bit. So there's an exempt tier, and that's your personal cultivation. Most indoor will qualify for that. And then there will be, basically the qualifications is that you have to occupy or disturb less than 2,000 square feet. So the only license class that could go into the exempt tier would be the specialty cottage license, where a maximum of 2,500 square feet. And it'll still be few and far between, because typically you occupy or disturb 2 to 3 times more area than your canopy area. So if you have 2,500 square feet of canopy, you're typically going to have 5,000 to 2,500 or 7,500 feet area that's disturbed. But there are ways to manipulate that to meet those requirements. So now we're into just 2 tiers for purposes of enrolling for coverage under the statewide general order. Tier 1 is for all those cannabis farms that occupy less than an acre. So that's really going to be your specialty cottage, specialty and small type licenses. And then tier 2 is for those larger operations, those that are larger than an acre. And so there'll be some small licenses that may occupy more than an acre. Remember, the upper limit on the small is 10,000 square feet. So for whatever reason, they still do occupy more than an acre. But then the medium and nurseries will likely fall into this tier 2. And the reason they've split them up this way is there's going to be a set of fees for tier 2 and a set of fees for tier 1. And the set of fees for tier 1 are going to be a lot more friendly to smaller cannabis farmers, whereas the tier 2 are going to be a lot larger fees. But they're larger farms, so they can pay those larger fees, right? So first you get your tier, that's based on the size of your farm. And then we have to assign a risk designation. The primary driver for risk designation is the slope on which your cannabis farm is located. And that's not, I've terraced off my site. It's flat now. It's the slope that was there prior to the terracing. And so if your slopes are less than 30% prior to any kind of land disturbance, you're going to be in the low threat, the low risk category. If you are greater than 30%, you are going to be at least in the moderate risk category. And then the designation of high risk, there's setbacks based on which risk level you fall into from surface water bodies. So if you're in the low risk, less than 30% slopes, you have to be 100 feet from a perennial water body, a lake, a river, lake, pond, wetland. You have to be 100 feet from an intermittent water body. Are you guys familiar with the stream classification system? Is that more familiar? That's okay. I'll go with the intermittent then. And then ephemeral. And then 50 feet from ephemeral. Ephemeral streams, they only run basically during the winter. They run when it's raining. They run shortly after storms, and they may run in the spring for a short period of time. Intermittent streams, they go dry eventually, but they run for at least half the year, generally speaking. Perennial streams, they run all the time. The Yuba River is a perennial stream, and if you notice, so the setback requirements are less stringent if you're on a lower slope. When you go to a higher slope, so you go to more than 30% slopes, the setback requirements are increased. You now have a 200-foot setback from a perennial water body or wetland, 50 feet from an intermittent water body, and then 100 feet from an ephemeral water body. And so the way you find yourself into the highest risk is if you're in violation of any of those setback requirements. And basically, we'll get into this a little bit, but if you are within any of those setbacks, you get a chance. First, you enroll as a high-risk cannabis farm, and then you develop a plan to basically move your farm out of that risk. So no one is supposed to stay in the high-risk category for more than a year or two. And actually, they're not supposed to do it for more than a year. You have to go through a whole time schedule. You propose a time schedule to do more than a year.
How is this risk assigned? I mean, what is the process where it establishes the percentage of your slope?
Well, so you're gonna. Actually, I think that's like the next thing.
Wait.
Can you go back real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
I will get to that.
I saw it. There's a calculation there.
Yeah, well, there's a calculation on the slope, but I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit on the application process,
Okay.
And then back up. So I think that might make that flow better, especially given the question. All right, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll share this with you if you'd like.
Okay.
I can send you a PDF.
What classification are like culverts, like in water?
Okay, so the stream is a stream just because there's a culvert in it, but that's a really important question because there's another part of this application for licensure, and it's also one of the requirements for compliance with this permit is that if you have a culvert, was it permitted through California Department of Fish and Wildlife when you put it in? Did you have a culvert?
It was, yeah. Well, I mean, just like a street, my road, because I live in the forest.
Oh, it was just your road.
The forest, so there's a culvert on the. If I just didn't know the setback regulation for being close to something that.
Well, so
what that stream of the culvert would be.
For storm drainage.
Yeah, for storm.
yeah, so it depends. Is the culvert just for storm drainage?
Yeah.
Is the culvert for a class 1 or a ephemeral
It's pretty much, it's dry
Storm,
now. So
yeah.
It's dry now, but then,
yeah.
is there an identifiable channel? Okay, so it's at least a class 3 or ephemeral drainage. And so preparing for, I assume since you're here, you're going to apply for a license to cultivate at one point or another. You're gonna need a letter as part of your application package from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. One thing that they're gonna wanna know are any culverts on your property. Now, they're probably not going to make you do anything for that. It sounds like, especially, is it just run when it's raining, basically?
It runs and then.
A couple days after.
I know. The first few months of the year, it's running full time.
But by March, if it's not raining, or April,
This year was different.
This year was.
Yeah, it was a stream of wet year, yeah. Well, it sounds to me like this is a class 3 or a ephemeral water course,
Okay.
and in which case they're not going to make you take it out. If you did any changes to that, they would make sure. So one of the things that I do is calculate the 100-year flood flow. So you take the area of the watershed to that culvert, and you want to size that culvert so that they don't want culverts plugging. Every culvert will eventually plug if it's overloaded, and so. But the problem with culverts is they plug or they get overloaded if they're not sized adequate to carry the sufficient flow through the culvert, and then they overtop. And when they do that, all that fill material of the road gets washed down into the creek below. It was one of the biggest issues on the north coast. You probably heard of like the damage to the coho habitat and all as a result of logging. Well, a lot of those, some of it was just sediment coming off of clear cuts. But there's still legacy impacts, and those are just from old roads that continue to bleed sediment into those creeks. And it's these culverted watercourse crossings. They eventually plug, they overtop, and all that fill material gets released into the creek.
What about putting, we did a permaculture course at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and they do big metal poles essentially, right before the drainage holes, so that kind of diverts the flow, so that way nothing does really actually get stuck.
They're trash barriers basically.
Yeah.
They capture any kind of slash that's kind of making its way down.
So have they put in if you have that, does that affect
It's not a requirement. I don't think you need it for this situation. Now they're typically for flashier streams where you're expecting a lot of, like Caltrans puts them in a lot, where they're expecting a lot of debris flows, and they don't want that to plug, because as soon as that culvert plugs, they lose their $100,000 section of Caltrans road, highway, and so that's why they do that. It may be a little bit of an overkill. Probably the best thing you can do is at the inlet. It's a flared inlet, and what that does is as a stick or something is floating down, is traveling in the stream, it'll catch it and it'll turn that stick, so now the long way is facing down towards and it can pass right through the culvert. Whereas if you just put a pipe there, they can just they just float down, they hit it, and then they're done. They'll float up and they'll keep collecting more and more, and that's how plugging occurs.
Okay.
So getting back to the application process this is the application process for this permit. And to get the licensure, you're going to receive. So first, you apply online. It's a self-certification process. That's what I wanted to get to. You're basically self-certifying that what you enter in there is true, but it's a process of verification. They're going to verify it. The water board will. So first, you go online, you apply, and then you will receive a notice of receipt. And they don't make it clear in the draft statewide general order at this time, but before I left the water board, it sounded like what they were going to do is you were going to get that notice of receipt immediately. You go online, you fill out the form, and they'll send you a notice of receipt, and it's going to have a number on there, most likely what they refer to as a waste discharger identification number. And so that you're already logged into the system then. From there, you have 30 days to pay the application fee, which is just the first year annual fee for the permit. And then you have 90 days to submit any supplemental documentation. Everyone's going to have a site management plan developed. I can get into that a little bit, but I just wanted to skip ahead to this to kind of show you this is the process, so you can kind of think of the process as I'm going through the next couple of slides. And I'm going to back up. Okay. So, so first, you're part of that self-certification is you're going to say, no, I'm a low risk or a moderate risk or a high risk, and you're going to take a look, how close is my cannabis farm to this creek over here? Is it within 200 feet? And I'm on greater than 30% slopes. you might have to self-certify that you're in a high risk, but that's okay. We can start working towards correcting the situation. Basically, it's not a deal breaker. We get a year more time if needed to bring everything into compliance. So slope, I just cut and paste this from the statewide general order, but basically what there's two ways to do this. You can get a clinometer, or you can get some kind of surveying station, and you need to find the elevation or the difference in elevation between the top and bottom of your cannabis farm, the highest and lowest of your cannabis farm, and then the distance between those. That's what is required. You need the elevation distance and the horizontal distance, and then that is going to give you your percent when you multiply it. So that's going to give you like if it's 30%, it'll give you 0.3. You multiply it by 100, now you got 30%. It's a fairly simple formula. The way the water board's going to be double checking it, and so therefore the way that I will be doing it for our clients is using topographic maps and LiDAR imagery. So you can get 2, 4, 5 foot contour intervals, and we can say here's the farm. This is the elevation at the top of the farm. This is the elevation at the bottom. Here's the distance between, and then we can spit it out, and that's going to be what the water board's going to be looking at, so you can have 100% confidence in that.
If you're at the top of a hill and maybe it's been graded a little bit, that topo will give you a more accurate. That's the figure they'll deal with.
Exactly.
Of what the projected.
See, that's why I'm going to go with the topos on this, the highest resolution topos we can get. Because exactly for that reason, because there has been land disturbance for some of these. If you're on top of a hill, we don't know what that previous height was, and I've seen some significant earth movement associated with cannabis farms, and so we have to get back to what was there before.
And it's only for the portion that's under cultivation, right? Or it's not including buildings and roads and...
It's not including roads as long as the roads are being maintained per the Forest, Ranch, and Rural Roads Handbook. I have an image of it at the end. That's becoming the Bible for road maintenance. Do you guys have a gravel road that access your cannabis farm?
Yeah, and
So
it's
that-
private, so that's why.
So you're responsible for that. So if you have a shared road, if it's shared and you still have a partial responsibility. So one of the things is they're turning if you're going to cultivate, if your cannabis farm is going to be on your personal property, you're turning your residential property for all intents and purposes into a commercial property. And so you're going to have to bring it up to standards. We don't know what Nevada County is going to require, but I can tell you that other counties, and so likely Nevada County will have a similar it will be there's requirements for fire truck access and road widths, and some counties even require commercial road standards. Sonoma County is one of those that they require you to bring your road up, which is your driveway, right, to commercial road standards. I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen here. But those are the kind of issues that we're talking. But you are going to have a place for a fire truck to go pull out, or for two-way traffic, so that two fire trucks can pass each other, two Cal fire trucks can pass each other side by side.
Only not the whole road, only on one.
There's a certain number of footage that they'll say. Sometimes it's 600 feet, sometimes it's 200 feet.
And once again, I don't know that they're going to require that, but I would say that one's fairly likely.
Yeah.
That's more likely than not to
Yeah.
be in whatever the county requires at the end of the day. Just because that's a pretty common commercial standard
Right.
across the state of California.
And it's common in residential building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly. And then there probably are already standards about your driveway steepness.
Yeah.
Once you get to above a certain percentage steepness, there may be a requirement for you to pave your driveway. At least if you're going to be using it during the winter, there's a requirement in the water quality permit that you weatherproof it, you winterize your driveway, which means applying gravel essentially, and drainage structures as needed. And that you can find all that information. I have a picture of it. It's the last slide. And it's a book, so you can get it free online, you can download it free online, but it's a manual, it's like 400 pages. It's $35 to have them, because that's just you're paying for the printing fee. I'm about to order like 100 of them because I think every one of my clients needs that book, because they need all. The greatest source of sediment pollution is not going to come from your cannabis farm. It's not going to come from your cultivation area. It's going to come from your roads, and roads are going to be the biggest issue.
Now, cottage, if you qualify for cottage, then you're not in that commercial area, and so.
If you qualify for cottage exempt, under this, so we don't know what they're going to require cottage
Exactly.
in the county yet. I mean, do you know? Do you have an idea?
No, I don't. No, and we just got done with the CAG, and it's all trying to get all the agencies to have their own, piece of the deal, and it seems to me like it's still pretty much up in the air for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But, okay.
But all of this is official, right? This is the last.
This is all
final
draft. This is all draft.
Okay.
But there will be some changes. I actually have a couple of things that I'm going to voice some issues, some contradictions I've noticed in it. But it's not final, but it's pretty close. And the things that are in the principles and guidelines, and a lot of these things are in the principles and guidelines, those are kind of set in stone because they were mandated by the legislature. It was part of it was not Bummer, but it's now MCRSA, which is no longer MCRSA, now it's Anyways, it was part of the adoption, but it was MMRSA at that time, and for them to develop these rules and regulations. So then this is just getting back to, those are the riparian setbacks. I showed you what they were earlier per your low risk, moderate risk, and then so if you're in the high risk category, you're applying for a variance and basically saying, okay, here I am in that high risk category. We're going to develop a plan, which I'll get to on the following slides, to get out of this high risk category. Basically, is what we're at there. And that was the enrollment process. We have a couple of people. I'm just going to go over the enrollment process. So what we're talking about is the water quality permit, and the process for applying will be an online application followed by a notice of receipt from the water board. Will give you a notice of receipt. You have 30 days to submit your annual fee, and then you have 90 days to submit the follow-up documentation, and you can request for an extension.
Is that fee going to vary depending on the risk that you were defining?
Yes. So the fees will be, remember I talked about the tiers,
right.
Tier 2 and Tier 1. Tier 2 is for those larger cannabis farms, and so the fees are going to be significantly higher for those. But they also are going to have a range from low, moderate to high. So the Tier 2
within
high.
that category.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Tier 2 high is going to be the highest fee. Tier 1 low will be the lowest fee. That makes sense?
No, it does.
So there'll be a gradient, basically. So these are the technical reports that will be required. These are the reports that are going to need to be submitted within 90 days. For tiers 1 and 2, every cannabis farm that's getting licensed from Cannabis is going to have a site management plan developed, even if they're exempt. A site management plan. There are some specific requirements of the site management plan, but it's basically just where are things located on your cannabis farm, and what are the best management practices. Although they just, if any of you guys have seen me speak when I was with the water board, best management practices was the buzzword. Those are the practices we would implement to protect water quality. Where they're changing that now, it's now referred to as best practical treatment and controls. But basically, it's just what you need to do to protect water quality, state water and natural resources from your cannabis farm. And so that's part of the site management plans. You're going to lay out and say, hey, I've got some straw wattles on the low end of my farm for any sediment that may become eroded, detached, and transported down. It'll be captured before it goes off of my cannabis farm. So that's for all, no matter what risk level they fall under. For the moderate risk level, you now have to develop a site erosion and sediment control plan. Remember, these are the cannabis farms that are on greater than 30% slopes, but they still comply with the setback requirements from the surface water resources. And the site erosion and sediment control plan has to be developed by someone who has a license, a certification, a qualification in the state of California, that the state of California recognizes. Basically demonstrating that they have the knowledge and expertise in erosion and sediment control. And then if you fall into the high threat category, there's the disturbed area stabilization plan. This is that plan I've been referring to. If your cannabis farm is within those setback requirements, you're going to have to move it, and then you're going to have to basically return that area that you're abandoning back to a natural state and a stable state. And so that's what this plan is. Once again, this plan has to be developed by a licensed, registered, certified professional in the state of California. And then that also have that time schedule. Basically, you have till if you plan on getting a license, if you plan on enrolling for coverage under this permit next year, you'll have until November 15th to basically abandon those areas within the setback requirements, so you can get your growings, you can go through your whole cannabis, your cultivation season, harvest, and then you need to implement all the measures before November 15th to return that area. And then next year, if you continue to cultivate cannabis, you're going to have to establish a farm in a different area, basically, that's not within the setback requirements. For the tier 2, they have a nitrogen management plan. Once again, this is proposed and it's only concerned with nitrogen. One of the concerns that I have as an environmentalist is there's, and one of the comments I plan on making, you guys are probably all aware of, to increase the flowering capacity of a cannabis plant, you bombarded with a lot of phosphorus and potassium, and that's at the end of the cultivation period, closer to harvest. So I don't think they're really getting at the issue of nutrients here. I think this is just I don't think they're really getting at it here. So that's not going to know. It's like nitrogen's not the issue with cannabis, I don't believe. I think it's the phosphorus and potassium that are added right before harvest, or not right before, but they're added closer to harvest, with the plant having less time to take up all those nutrients. And then you go right into the winter wet weather period, it rains on it, and those nutrients leach into the ground. Meanwhile, the nitrogen was added months before, and has been uptaken by the plant at that point. Anyways, that's my soapbox for today. And then the exempt in all sites, if they've registered with the water board, the exempt are those, not the personal sites or the indoor sites. These are the exempt cottage ones. But if you register with the water board and you're no longer going to have a cannabis farm on your property, you have to go through a closure process. The site closure plan has to be submitted to the water board 90 days before actually closing down the farm and walking away. And basically what it is a plan to return the land to the state it was before you turn it into a cannabis farm. All right. And since the theme of the day's Growing Green workshop was water conservation and use, I pulled out the requirements. These are actual requirements set forth in the principles and guidelines policy. This is not going away, basically, and these are rules that you're going to have to abide by, because these were in that part of the water board permit that was mandated by the state legislature. And so I'll just go through that. You're going to have to regularly inspect your water delivery system. You're also going to have to start daily calculating or or measuring the amount of water you use. That's going to be huge. They want it daily records. You know, you can use various methods. You can you can say you figure out how much you're watering per day, and then you're like, all right, I'm only using for these plants I use 250 gallons a day. If I turn the system on for 30 minutes, it uses 250 gallons. So you just do 30 minutes every day, and that's how you can do it. And you just keep a log. But water use is a huge component of this permitting and compliance package. So daily inspections or daily recording of your water use. You have to keep these files on site for up to 3 years, and you have to inspect your system regularly. You have to use water conserving irrigation methods. Most of you probably already are. But I know some that are not, and their sprinkler systems are not going to fly anymore. You have to mulch your cultivation areas. This was just a practice that was recommended before, but now it's a requirement. It's a rule that you're going to have to apply a mulch to your to the surface of your, or you can also use a cover crop if you'd like, but basically to keep the sun off the ground around your plants. I was at a cannabis farm today, and they just applied a bunch of mulch, and they said that they noticed it made the plants healthier because the ground wasn't getting as hot, and they put it on. They also had some smart pots, and the roots were healthier because everything wasn't getting as hot, and then they also were using less water. The water was staying around, so that's a good thing, I guess. And then those are the water conservation. This is the book I was telling you about, the Handbook for Forest, Ranch, and Rural Roads. This was put together by the Pacific Watershed Associates. And you can, if you Google Forest, Ranch, and Rural Roads, it'll take you right there. Also, it's referenced about 80 times in this permit, so they have the website listed there. Once again, it's free, completely free to get it electronically. I would recommend getting a hard copy. It's $35, and the $35 only covers just the printing of the book. They're not charging you for anything else. And it's going to be something that when an inspector eventually shows up to your licensed cannabis farm, you're going to want to have that as part of your compliance package, basically. That's an example of that's what the cover of the statewide general order looks like. And then that's my contact information. I will do my little plug. I'm an environmental compliance consultant now, and I like to help you guys any way I can. That's why I got into this. It's going to be, the cannabis industry is going to be the most highly regulated and most environmentally friendly industry in California. That's the way things are going. That's the way it's definite. And compliance issues are going to be, I think, the issue that plagues cannabis farmers after they finally get through all of this application, all of this permitting. They finally get their license. They finally can, operate in a full above-board market, and then you're going to be inspected yearly, if not more frequently. Any questions? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we are high risk and above a 30% slope. We have, this property is pretty old, and I think it was created a really long time ago, but so the garden's on a pretty flat area, but to mitigate our drainage, we have a swale and berm system, maybe about 7, that catches the runoff, and it gets filtered as it goes through, and it also, we also have food and flowers and everything else in there.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to necessarily abandon our farm, even if we're mitigating our...
If you are within the setback requirements, yes. But what you've told me...
I don't think we're, I think the streams and all that, I think we're far enough away from all the natural...
Okay, so you're not in the high risk, you're in the moderate. You're tier 1 moderate, maybe. And so you're above 30%. You comply with the setback, and so it sounds like you've already implemented the practices that are going to need to be implemented. Now you just have to have someone that is certified, licensed, registered in the state of California, basically stamp say that your system is sufficient to protect water quality, basically, and yeah, that's pretty much where you're at there. And that's that site. These are all new terms to me. Sorry. That site erosion sediment control plan. So yeah, if you're going to be tier 1, I would assume, tier 1 moderate, and so you'll have the site management plan, but you can develop the site management plan simultaneously. If you already are going to have a site erosion sediment control plan, you might as well have the same person, because it's going to be the same map, same diagram. You have one done for you. And so yeah, and then the only other thing you would have to deal with would be the closure plan. One day maybe. Yeah.
Is it just an estimate of how much water you use per plant? Because I mean, we have like a 2,500 gallon tank that we fill for the garden area, and it's just there's vegetables and flowers, and I use the water for that, and I could estimate how much you use for
It
that.
gets all kind of together.
But when you turn it back to watering the vegetables, all of a sudden you'd have to recalculate or like empty it and then fill it back up again.
Yeah.
Just to I mean, I could get
Well,
precise.
so you just need to get a log going. So if you know my system, what the cannabis farm, when I turn that valve and now I'm watering it, it flows at 2 gallons per minute. And so you just need to keep your time. So it'll take some rigging at first to figure out how fast. But once you get your rate of flow, then you just need to keep up with your time, and you have a log of your time, and then you multiply the time by gallons per minute.
Because that changes with weather. And
Exactly. So you're gonna,
like you said,
it's gonna start out.
multi-year.
Yeah, you're gonna start out with a lower time of watering, and then you're gonna have to increase it. So just figure out what your system puts out. And then you just need to keep up with your time. You don't have to actually have an inflow meter.
Okay. We just did this like calculation yesterday and came up with, instead of like doing it by day, we like averaged for the whole year and came up with per pound before drying, no, after drying, per pound after drying, it's 2,000 gallons of water that goes in, which is incredible.
It's almost $1 a gallon. I wish it was $1 a gallon. but-
Well, you have to now recapture that drying water.
Exactly. Yeah, and your dry house has a
Right.
benefit.
That
sounds scary.
wouldn't cost too much.
How much do almonds do we know?
So I don't know. Yeah, I think a single almond tree would definitely use more than a single cannabis plant.
Yeah.
There are some associates that they did some calculations there for cannabis farms in Calaveras County. They implemented the Calaveras Cannabis Alliance implemented a very sophisticated water monitoring system for a handful of cannabis farms, and they wanted to get to that. There's a very, depending on the strain of cannabis plant, depending on the aspect of the light, so they got a broad array, and they averaged them all down for how much water was needed, and they compared it. A single cannabis plant used approximately the same amount as a single grapevine, vineyard,
Wow.
whatever stalk uses,
Yeah.
whatever. That basically, and that's what they kind of narrowed down. They did also tell me the gallons, but I can't remember.
And for us, and probably for that too, it was a really, like, that was at max efficiency, like under our, like, a very efficient system. And
Yeah.
so if you are still using a sprinkler or something, then it's probably significantly more.
Exactly.
Or if you have a leak, or if you're,
Or if you're in
any
smart
number of
parts and
things.
not in the ground or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the difference between.
Yeah.
I guess just from
The hole in your drip system.
what since I left the water board, I've been actually like working with cannabis farmers. The one thing I've noticed is there's a significant the smart pots. They don't conserve water very well at all. They also let the heat your roots and everything. Yeah, and so the in-ground, the cannabis farmers who have been digging holes into the ground, and then they mix up their soil mixture in the hole. Those are the ones that at least use the least amount of water that I've seen. So that's anecdotal from the last couple of months, but you guys all seem to concur.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they drain really well and all
And you
that
yield
stuff.
a lot more when you're not in a stupid pot.
Yeah. Those pots. Although they've worked out for a couple of clients because they were within setbacks from property lines, and so they just pick up their
Yeah.
pot. They even had them on pallets, so they just had to get a forklift and move them. So that was, I think they knew what was coming up. They knew what was coming, so they were prepared for it at the beginning.
In the event of emergency, good idea, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Very general
Yeah.
question. So I'm not very familiar with regulations for other types of farming, other types of cultivation, but I'm just thinking about other things that I've seen in California on slopes, and actually grapes is one of those, like you see like vineyards or orchards, and similarly thinking about the nutrient management plans. And I mean, of course, first I think it was CAFOs and like tremendous amounts of nitrogen going in for those farms. And so are other types of farms also required to meet these sorts of regulations?
They are, but so we'll start with the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act provided a tremendous amount of exemptions for traditional agriculture. The state of California, because the CAFOs and also other agricultural use, other fertilizer use, particularly the Central Valley and the Salinas Valley, we do have groundwater that is polluted, and there are people that use that as their drinking water. And they have a more, nitrogen is the issue. I think that's where they got this nitrogen. Actually, I know that's where they got this nitrogen, because if in the traditional ag, so in traditional ag in California, they belong, if you're commercial ag, they belong to these coalitions. And then one of the things is you have to have a nitrogen management plan, and you have to monitor your groundwater wells for excess nitrogen. But that kind of farming uses a lot more nitrogen. Nitrogen is the dominant fertilizer component. That's what I was saying in my soapbox about, cannabis actually is not a nitrogen dominant fertilizer use as a practice. But yes, they do have to comply with a lot of these things, but this is about 10 times more strict on cannabis farmers, because they're not allowing cannabis to have the same exemptions that traditional ag does. And so you mentioned vineyards. Vineyards is about halfway between what will be eventually for cannabis farming and traditional farming. They're about halfway in between. They were the most strict agricultural practice. Now cannabis is going to be the most strict.
So from your professional opinion, would it be wise to apply for this prior to being licensed by the state? Or is that
You're
a
going to
waste of
have to.
money?
So
You have to
you
have
can't
this
get a
first.
license from the state until you already have complied with this.
Okay.
So they expected to release this on June 14th. Like I said, they didn't release it. As far as I know, they still have to adhere to the 60-day comment period, although they didn't change their meeting dates. So they have some workshops that they have some workshops already scheduled, but instead of being in the second half of the 60 days as they originally scheduled, they're now in like the first half. So I don't know how that's going to work. But anyway, so they still plan, and they said that they still have it on the website, they still plan for adoption in October. So the permit gets adopted, then it's set in stone pretty much until, it takes a lot to change it after that. And then it'll probably take them November, December before they get that website up. So if you, and you guys in Nevada County are kind of in a unique position, because you've got to figure out what the county's going to do. You've got to be in compliance with county ordinances, county codes and all to get your state license, but you might not know what they are. So I'm going to use an example of what our clients are doing in Yolo County and Trinity County, where they will be able to January 1st, 2018, because the rules have been made. And so that 90-day period is really tight. You shouldn't even go online to register unless you've already got someone where, if you're going to fall into the moderate tier, you need to go ahead and make sure you got someone ready to work on that. That's a really tight window for the kind of reports, and then it's not just going to be you, it's going to be 10,000 other cannabis farmers scrambling in California, scrambling to do this all at the same time. So if I may provide recommendations, your water source, as part of your application for licensure, they're going to want documentation of your water source. So that is your well. You have to, if you have a well, you have to get a report from the Department of Water Resources. Either it's a well report saying that they have a well log on file for your farm, or it's a letter for them saying that they don't have one. And as far as I know, there's nothing written that it's going to say they're going to make you jump another hoop. But I think maybe the next step will be at somewhere down the line to re-up. You're going to have your well log. You're going to have to basically update your well. Okay, so that's the well. If you're using rainwater catchment, we were talking about this earlier, you're going to have to provide information about your rainwater catchment system. If you're using water from a supplier, a commercial supplier, so this is NID, this is the city of Grass Valley, this would be the city. If someone provides you water and it doesn't come in a truck, you're gonna have to provide documentation associated with that. If it comes in a truck, that's gonna, if you have water deliveries, that's a whole nother threshold, and you better have a super legit water delivery guy, because there's a lot of documentation associated with that about where they get their water from. And then if you use water from a creek, if you're using it in accordance with like a riparian water right or appropriative water right, then you're going to have to also prove that water right. Then you're going to have your site management plan put together. You're going to have, there's EnviroStore. It's just a website, the Department of Toxic, DTSC, Department Toxic Substances Control. It's EnviroStore. Is the do I have that website? No, I don't have one. Sorry. Anyway, so you go on there. I pulled it up for this room. There's like 30 toxic toxic sites within 10 miles of this room on there. But you're basically, they want to know that your cannabis farm isn't sitting on top of an old landfill or something like that, or another area where it shouldn't be. They don't want medicine being grown where there's potential contaminants. And then what else? So your proof of your water board permit, the letter from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So everyone, so my advice, if you got this culvert situation, start talking to CDFW now. Get that letter as soon as possible, because here's the thing, if you got a well, there's 4 people in the state of California that can issue that well report or the letter in the entire state. So if you wait till December to request it, there's going to be 10,000, 28,000 other cannabis farmers also doing it. Those 4 people get overloaded, and you don't get that well report, and you can't apply for licensure until whenever you get that, and it may be 6 months down the road. So my advice is start doing these things in anticipation. You can go ahead and get your well report now if you're using well water. You can go ahead and start a consultation process with CDFW. I don't think they're ready to start issuing the letters yet. That's something they're developing. But you can go ahead and get an informal email with CDFW saying, okay, your culvert is not of concern. It doesn't raise to that level. And then when you can get that letter, you shoot that email right back. It's like, hey, you've already reviewed this. You mind sending me the letter? Do all these things up front, because what you don't want to do is get lost in the 10, 20, 30, 40,000 applications that are going to come starting in 2018. So EnviroStore you can do any minute. It's called a lake and stream bed alteration. That's what they're looking for. If you need to go through that, I don't think you need to based on what you've told me. But like I said, you're going to still need that letter. If you do think you're going to need it, we had a couple people join us. If you have a culvert or a bridge, if you have to cross over a water body on your property to access your cannabis farm or to access your residence, then you're going to want to, and it's a perennial water body or a intermittent water body, you're going to want to start to work for that ASAP if you want to get your license as soon as possible, because that process is onerous. It takes a professional, just like these reports. You're going to need someone, you'll need a biologist, and then also someone licensed, registered, or certified in the state of California to submit that application package. If they tell you, first you say, hey, do I need to get a lake and stream bed alteration agreement? and they say, yes, you do, okay, that's when you go, now you gotta hire professionals to put together the application package. It goes through, and it can take a year to get that through the whole process. So if there's anybody, if you have a bridge or a culvert that flows water, not like your culvert that's mainly stormwater drainage, but a creek crossing, even a dry creek, you might want to start that process sooner rather than later. That's probably the single largest time sink in the application process would be that, unless you're developing a new farm. If you have to move your farm, the whole environmental review process could be timely as well. It's not going to be a situation, there'll be very few cannabis farms that can obtain licensure before March 2018. A lot of them are going to need time throughout the entire year to get that licensure.
So verification that I have a permitted well from Nevada County isn't enough.
Well, if you have a permitted well from Nevada County, most likely it was so it was in the 70s the county started requiring
That's
well
when this
permits.
house was built in
Yeah.
the mid-70s.
And so theoretically, Nevada County has turned over that to the Department of Water Resources, your well report. And now Department of Water Resources has a log. In applying for licensure, more documentation is better than less. So if you have a well report with the county, and well, first, it does state in the proposed rules that it has to come from the Department of Water Resources. So first, it's just a simple form you fill out. It's fairly easy. You email it to one of those 4 people at the Department of Water Resources, and their email addresses are listed at the top. You send it off, and then depending on which one the region you're in here, it's taken about a month for me to get those well reports back. I've submitted some in Trinity County and Butte County, and they're in the most northern Department of Water Resources region, and I get those like 24 or 48 hours back. But anyways, so you send off for it. You're either going to get your well report from the Department of Water Resources, in which case you're good. You don't need any more. But let's say they send you a letter saying they don't have it on file. You don't have to do this, but if it was me, this is what I would do. I would go and see what Nevada County has on file. Because you can say, hey, Department of Water Resources doesn't have me on file, but look, I have a permitted well, you know.
So any more documentation, like well test or anything?
That's where I think the next step is going to be. So I don't think part of your application package you're going to have to do that. I think so. Trinity County has this. If you don't have a well report within the last 6 years, you have to have a pump test done, and basically it's an evaluation of your well.
It's a ring.
Yeah.
They come and they put a high flow pump down your hole and they pump it for 3 hours and pump it all over the ground. Yeah, well tests suck.
Yeah.
If you're
You could store some of that water.
Put a
they're
hose
not
and run it
supposed
up
to.
to your tank, right?
Yeah, I mean you
Yeah.
could, but yeah, that is what a well test
You're gonna
is.
give them $400. That's even worse.
Yeah, that's cheap.
Yeah.
$400 is cheap. It's costing
That's
guys.
what going right up here is.
Okay, Trinity County is 800.
Is it?
Yeah, but there's a high demand for it.
Yeah.
And they have to come from Reading to over.
Have you read anything? Because I've searched around. Are they going to make herbicides, pesticides, and fertilization applicator license part of the package?
No, the nitrogen management plan. You're probably going to need to be a licensed applicator would be good for that. I don't think it's a requirement. Actually, no, it's not a requirement yet.
Crews, if they apply anything, and then they've got to fill out the form and send it into the county ag once a month, whether you do any type of fertilization, spraying, or whatever.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22 because the kinds of pesticides, herbicides that you would use to need a pesticide applicator's license aren't allowed to be used on cannabis. So if you were going to, but that being said, I do know of some Yuba County farms that they've had licensed pesticide applicators come out and even though they're applying pesticides that are approved, they still went to that nth degree of having a licensed pesticide applicator apply those pesticides and then also document it, because that was the side. I think that's why they used the pesticide applicator. It was the documentation on the back end. They didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
And so they just hired this person. But I don't think that's going to be a requirement, just because I don't think you're going to be able to use those pesticides on cannabis plants. I mean, for example, the pesticide requirements are going to be so stringent. It's going to be incredible. I participate in the California Growers Association, their regulatory affairs group, or whatever. And when the draft or the proposed rules and regs came out for medicinal cannabis, the manufacturers of edible products were up in arms because they could take a cannabis product that was completely free of all pesticides, 100% clean, but as soon as they mixed it with chocolate that was, even if it was organic chocolate, but it was sourced from South America, it would come up hot, and it wouldn't pass the testing requirements when they were making their edibles. And so I actually don't know how that was resolved, but I focus more on cannabis farmers. That's where my niche is. I'm not really interested in the retail or
So you're
manufacturer
saying
side.
Cannabis edibles are like the cleanest food you can eat.
Yeah, and they really will be. I mean, that's going to be the case. Is like the things that are mixed with the cannabis will be the cleanest thing in those edibles, per the standards that are going to be required. Yeah. I think you guys are in a great location because of your climate here. There's a lower threshold right now in the Emerald Triangle for them to actually get, it's actually just Humboldt County. There's a lower threshold to get a license in Humboldt County, a state license, because the county has already adopted some permanent rules and regulations. But the moisture over there, I think, is going to cause them a lot of hard times when it comes to complying with these pesticide limits, these very, very strict pesticide limits. And what we're now discovering is all these daughter products, all these byproducts of these OMRI listed, naturally derived pesticides. Still, when they're combusted, they have toxic daughter products, and that would come up hot. So you go to test it, and now you've got your cannabis farm, which you've used nothing but OMRI certified products on. Everything you think you're golden, but then your plants come up hot because the person you purchased your starch from used something that was banned, and it's systemic in the plant. That happened a lot last year in Yolo County when they blew it up. Everybody was Yolo County, they're able to have an acre of canopy, and so they blow it up. They have 1,000 cannabis plants, but they couldn't propagate their plants on their own, so they're buying them from everywhere they can. Well, then our majority of their products testing hot because the people they purchased them from had used some kind of pesticide, and even though it hadn't been applied to the plant since it was just a little seedling, it's still systematic within the plant, and the plant tests hot for that pesticide. And I think those problems are going to persist in the more moist regions of the North Coast and the Triangle. I think they're going to have a lot of issues with, also just when you have a high density of cannabis farms, you have a higher probability of transference of pests. All right, any other questions?
So is there an accumulation now of a database of pesticides that are in California, and even to the point of this daughter products kind of thing that they're...
At this moment, so Department of Toxic Substance Control and the water boards are developing a list for that. There's two things. They have federal requirements that can't contradict the federal, and because of the prohibition on cannabis at a federal level, there's some restrictions there. Also, California Department of Food and Agriculture is doing their own research. In the future, there's going to be more products available. There's going to be more knowledge. Right now, the best knowledge is amongst well-organized growers groups. And then what is legal and what is not legal to use in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. That is your best information at this time. I don't remember it because, once again, this is it's not my my specialty, but there was a product that was commonly used in Oregon farms, and they just found out that one of the daughter products and so now it's banned in Oregon, basically, and trying to get that word out.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have to worry too much about federal restrictions at this point, so.
Yeah, but there are restrictions as far as pesticide application. So right now, you can only apply pesticides, and pesticides is a broad term. That doesn't mean something that it doesn't mean Roundup or anything like that. Neem oil is a pesticide. And so there are pesticides that they have to have a really broad listing federally. Basically, green plants is like as long as it can be used on green plants and there's no other restrictions, then it can make the list to be evaluated to see if it can be used on cannabis.
The only thing I use is BT a little bit,
Yeah.
for the.
I think you're not supposed to use that anymore.
Yeah.
There's a daughter product off of that it's when it's combusted. When it is consumed, it's not dangerous, but when it's combusted, it is. So yeah, the Monterey BT is not allowed
Some
anymore.
more hand picking of caterpillars.
Yeah.
And trichogamma wasps.
What's that?
Trichogamma wasps lay their eggs in caterpillar bodies.
Yeah.
And they're cool.
Well, it's
Yeah,
good to know this stuff, though,
Yeah.
Yeah, and those restrictions won't apply this year,
Yeah.
but next year, you're not going to be able to use that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a researcher at UC Davis who's selling predatory insects to take care of for.
Yeah, I know, but then you walk out that morning and that cola is just bombing, and you go,
But it feels
damn
really
those,
good.
damn those predatory insects. What happened to you? No, it's, so it's good to know, and then hopefully the industry will respond with something that deals with daughter products, and
Yeah, the more testing. The problem was there was not much testing done by highly sophisticated labs. There was a handful of labs, but they were more profit motivated. So they were testing for cannabinoids. They were testing for the most commonly used pesticides that really shouldn't have been used on. And so now we're having state dollars. These enormous taxes that cannabis farmers are going to be paying are going to research. Where most of this research is being done is a lab in Berkeley at the moment, and now they're just getting into all these daughter products. They're just now understanding. Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, they still don't know these things. California has already surpassed them in the testing and is going to continue to. Yeah.
okay,
All right.
thanks.
Thank you.
so much.
Okay, my name's John Whalin. I work at Sierra Plumbing Supply. I was a licensed landscaper. I was a general contractor, screwed up my back and went on the other side of the counter. What I am very good at is putting together water systems and how they work and how, he talked earlier about having to take your daily log. It's real simple. When I design out a system, you'll know exactly how much each pot gets and how long to run your system. Depending on your soil type, what you really got to watch is how far down the water's penetrating. If you're in ground or in the dump pots, then thank you, because I believe the same thing. Yeah, you know what, they have their place, because I understand. You
If
can't,
you rent or something.
well, and you can't put a hole in rock.
That's true.
You know, but if you take straw or put around them, stuff like that, that helps tremendously. I've seen a thermal imaging gun on the side of them, 160 degrees. So now our little roots are getting out there and they're going, oh cool, we're stretching out, and they hit that, and then boom, now we get roots done. Well, it takes them 3 days to get their crap back together. And finally they're back, and here it goes again. So, you know, you're not helping your stuff. But what I want to talk to you about is how to put your systems together and the parts to use. I've done, over the last 8 years, I don't know, probably 4,000 or 5,000 of these systems and help growers. And I don't charge. I want you, if you're going to put together a system, I want you to come in, I want you to learn the parts, I want you to learn how to do it correctly. Build it one time, it'll be there forever, and everything will be cool. The biggest thing that you've noticed with all your groups and everything, they want you to have a plan. I get that every day. 50 times a day. Guys come in and I'm going, okay, tell me about your grow. They can't tell me anything about it. You know, how long are your rows? How many pots? Well, I think there's 10. Well, how long is the row? Well, I don't know. This doesn't help. You know, because I'm going, okay, look, you're going to take, and I show them how to draw a little plot map, and we go out and here, let's start measuring stuff off or step it off, get me close. I can get it real close from there. But there's just no planning. Everything is by the seat of the pants. And I've been in business long enough that when you fly that way, you lose money because it's trial and error. You trial and error something, you're going to pay for it twice. Doesn't work out for anybody. First place I start is the well. I've been to a zillion sites. I've done over 600 systems this year. I get 4 months of hell in my world. And it's the same thing. Everyone coming in, had it today. Guy comes in, yeah man, I got 99 long term, I got a greenhouse full, and I need everything to irrigate. Okay, well, where's your layout? Oh, I don't have one. Well, what's your well produce? I don't know, but I need it now. Okay, so I whip out my magic wand and can't make it happen. You know, it's just not going to work. Sit down, make a map, get some measurements, figure out what your well does. Your well is the key to everything. You have a well?
No, I'm on city water.
Good for you, me too. I can't stand wells. You have a well?
I have a well.
You have a well? Well? Horsepower of the well.
I don't know.
How many gallons per minute does your well produce?
It fluctuates, but like 5
say
to 8, yeah, 5 to 8.
I have to test.
What size pump is in there?
That's a good question. I know how deep, it's not that deep though.
How about you?
Well, 2.5 horse and 18 gallons a minute,
How deep?
90 feet.
90 feet and 2.5 horse?
18.
It has to raise it 200 feet to get to.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, that's a way over,
The ground kind of shakes a little bit.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's costing you a fortune to pump it out versus a 1 horse pump or something like that.
Yeah, I know, and we kind of talked a little bit about that, but actually that was lower than the one that was in there. It was actually a 3 horse sitting in there. And it does pick up sediment, you know.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you have a well house? Do you have a well house?
No, but I just found out our well is 3 or 4 horsepower and something like 8 gallons per minute.
3/4, probably a 3/4.
Yes, it's a 3.
Yeah. Do you have a well house? Do you have a well house?
Yeah.
What's stored in there?
Pipes, nothing.
Yeah, nothing right
Pressure tank in there?
now.
No.
We just, it pumps it right to the holding tank.
Oh, okay, so you direct pump.
Yeah,
And
there's
do you
switches in
jenny
the
it up
house
or
with a
something, or
garden.
do you jenny it up?
There's power there.
There's
It was
power?
permanent.
Yeah.
I assume the building. was
So you have an
permanent.
electronic float inside your tank?
Oh, the float?
Yeah. It's on a wire, gray ball or something
One
like that.
side does. I have 2 tanks. We have two separate systems, which I talked to you before. I wanted to design the float because I have 2. I have another holding 2,500 gallon for a different, you know, the house area on a
Mhm.
different hill, so I can get different areas off of gravity.
Gotcha.
Which is great, but I mean, I haven't designed a system where they could float off the same. You know, it's just something I haven't.
Gotcha.
I still haven't dialed that one in.
And for me, I look at it that your water is the most important part of your piece of property, and you should know the basics of your well. You should know how deep it is, the size of the pump that's in there, how many gallons. Your well will produce different amounts of volumes of water, but that's not necessarily what your pump is. I have people that have, they can pull the cap off, water's gushing out, but they only have a 10-gallon a minute pump in there. So, you know, that you really should know that. And what your pressure switch is. Pressure switch is a little gray or black box, sometimes got a little arm on the side. That's what controls the pressure of your well. Because I get that every day, I'm asking questions, and all it is a trip back home to figure that out and then come back. And all you have to do is pull the cap off, careful there's electricity in there, check out what it says. It says cut in and cut out. And now you know what your pressure is on your well. So if you have a well, How many of you guys have this?
What is it?
This is an atmospheric vacuum breaker. What it does is it keeps your well water from being contaminated from anything that you're using outside.
Probably.
I would say that the wells up here, that it's probably 0.5% have them.
So what do
And-
you mean by contaminating?
Because if you think about it, no matter what your garden is,
Right.
A check valve?
no, check valve is it's just a one-way valve. It's worthless as far as backflow prevention to contaminate your
Oh.
well. So if you have my well sets here, all my garden, everything, my house is up here. Let's say I have a break in something. When you start draining out those lines so that you can get the water to stop, so you can glue, solder, whatever, it's sucking back on everything else. So now, if the dog has peed out there, or Mr. Deer or Bambi has come over and done their business there, that stuff's getting sucked down into our groundwater. Yeah, even the landscapers. When I signed up for my license, it was real simple. If I didn't put in some sort of backflow prevention, my license could be taken from me. So, that's always nice to know.
I'm sorry, how would that keep other things from filtering into the groundwater?
Oh, they're cool. Because
But
what,
like, they're going to filter into the groundwater unless it's like a confined.
yeah, but what they're saying is it'll bubble out here instead of going down the well and contaminating the
So it's
groundwater.
really surface water instead of groundwater.
Yeah.
That way.
So this is stuff that seeps into your irrigation system.
Yep.
That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
So this is something that hardwires directly into your, and this keeps that from happening, I guess.
So you guys have all seen irrigation valves? Okay, when they shut off, when you stop water from moving in one direction, it back sucks. And that's why a lot of times people are going, oh, I have a filter and everything, but my system's still getting clogged. Well, it's getting clogged because the emitter's sucking back a little bit each time. It's not actually what went through the line, it's what it picked up out of the pot. And there's ways to eliminate it. It's really cool because you take, I threw one in here because it's an air release valve. It just takes and allows the air to release out of the system, and now my little emitters won't suck up little pieces of drivel and get stuck in there. I had a guy today that was having this issue. And I'm quizzing him about it, and I'm going, okay, when you turn your system on, do you hear a bunch of hissing first? He goes, oh yeah, every line, you can hear it, blah, blah. I go, you have an air problem. No, my emitters are getting clogged, I need a filter. You have a filter, it wasn't your, it's the air sucking back when your valve turns off that's clogging your line. No, I talked to a bunch of my friends and went online, that's not the problem. Okay, dude, you know, your stuff can be clogged all you want, I can't see it from my house.
So
You know?
where does that get placed?
Usually the high point in the system.
Okay.
Anytime water is pumped, there's a certain amount of air that comes with it. And those bubbles will travel along the top of the pipe. Well, when they ride along, they get to this, they're released, and then this thing drops right back down. Yeah, and it's like $3.
And you can just, so like, I just set up a little drip system for
Mhm.
tomatoes and stuff like that, like separate from cannabis, but, so like you would just put that in like right by the spigot essentially, right? Like it's two tiny rows. Like,
If you're
the
coming off a
vacuum.
spigot, it should be a little bit further down.
Okay.
Did you put a little vacuum breaker on your spigot?
No, I have a pressure regulator and then just the timer with the filter on it, so.
Yeah, okay, so-
Probably you're gonna redo that.
Let's talk about those guys. You have some sort of filter, whether it be discs or a little wide filter like this, and either one of these are great. Only difference between them, he has way more filter area and you don't have to clean them as often. No one enjoys cleaning a filter, let's face it. And then you have some sort of pressure regulator. Okay, do you know that these are actually rated per gallons? And everyone's just going, oh, here, just stick this on. Well, if you calc out your system and I'm running 9 gallons a minute through your system, this thing's only rated for 8.
Okay.
Not gonna work. His buddy here, he's rated for 10. You could use him even though they're the same PSI regulators. So the other thing is there's a little teeny hole right back here. Okay? Everyone screws them in here and they fire it up and now, ooh, it's leaking. And they go, oh, this one's bad, or the threads, or they put more joint compound, or they put more Teflon tape. It will only hold back so much pressure. It's a relief hole. Or it'll just blow on by. So it's basically useless. So when you go to buy pressure regulators, make sure it's rated for the gallons that you need. Don't just throw any old pressure regulator because that's what the guy sold me. You know, and I want to touch on this point because this is something that it's a pet peeve of mine. If you go into any store and you start quizzing the guy about stuff, if he can't answer your questions, leave. He is not going to help you. He's going to lighten your wallet with a bunch of stuff that you don't really need or don't know how it works. And then you're going, okay, now I'm going to scrap all this because it doesn't work. Now that goes into the landfill and I'm going to do it all again. Doesn't work for anybody. I'm trying to think of the things that I go through every day. Polypipe. Everyone likes it, clamps, all that sort of stuff. You have to heat your fittings in and clamp it. Vinyl drip tubing. Everyone comes in, oh, I want poly to run on my lines. Well, okay, we start quizzing them. You know, do you want poly pipe or do you need vinyl drip tubing because you want to poke some holes in it and go out? I have guys that order the wrong stuff, blah, 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 and they spend hours drilling this stuff trying to put their emitters in. Yeah. Yeah, and you're just shaking your head going, dude, remember when we were trying to ask you all these questions and you kept saying, well, no, this is what my buddy used. That's the other thing. Your buddies are not irrigation specialists. Don't ask them. You'll see a bunch of stuff. There's huge fruit and fruit trees down in San Francisco that they took and ran an experiment about 15 years ago that they took every emitter that was out there on the market and properly installed, they all work the same. So it doesn't matter, oh no, these are the best, I get them from so-and-so, or these are the best. No, that's how you put your system together. That's all it's about. And part of that is going back to that plan, you know, having a plan. Lay your garden out for water. If you hodgepodge your plants everywhere, oh, I got one here, and oh, there's another one over there, you know, it's a crappy arrangement. You are going to have crappy irrigation. It's going to be difficult to control. It's going to be difficult to keep from getting low head drainage. When the valve shuts off and all the water starts running down those pipes and then boom, now this guy down here just mysteriously dies because, well, he's been overwatered. You deprived him of oxygen. So, and basically what we recommend is if you have short runs, it's this stuff. 5/8, or this is the fun part, they make 6 different sizes of 1/2-inch drip tubing. That's why you see all the little colored ends, green, blues, reds, black. And the reason they do that is to suck you into wherever you bought your stuff to come back and get your repair parts. Yeah, fun little inside trade tricks.
It's like iPhone chargers.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about joining PVC and drip tubing together. You can either thread it, or they make little glue-in socket adapters. I know guys that will actually take their coils out and put them in storage for the winter. So we take and thread it in here, the guy unthreads it, grabs his coil, throws it in storage. Now, that tubing is rated to outlast all of us. The first drip system I put in at my house is 28 years old and I'm still using all the same stuff. Yeah, that's how long it should last. You should not be changing it seasonally. And if you're feeding through your system, okay, cool. But run a little fresh through it afterwards. You know, and that flushes everything out. You're not taking and watering your fertilizers away. It's all right there. You know, especially if you're watching how deep your water's penetrating. You know, with all plants, it's usually if you're figuring 18 inches, 2 feet down, it's the top. If 2 feet down, it's the top 12, 16 inches, where all the feeding, air intake, all that stuff. The big roots down at the bottom, they're just to hold the plant up so it doesn't fall down. If all your water and fertilizer's down there, you might as well just take your fertilizing dollars and just throw them on the ground next to it, because that's where they're gonna be. The plant's not using them.
How do you tell how deep the water's getting in there?
Old-fashioned way. You should be feeling and checking it out. The farmers, you know, I know this one old farmer, he carries around a spade all the time. He's always that, yeah, perfect. Goes around over here, digs down, oh yeah, perfect. You know, his water is exactly where it needs to be. You know, so it should be short run times. Any soil brokers in here? Good. The soil that they sell you guys is crap. Yes.
Yep.
I recommend that you take, that's one of my first questions. Is it brand new soil or have you been working it? If you've been working it, I can take any drip emitter and it will spread. Wow, perfect. I take new soil, I gotta put 1,000 coils on it because I can't spread the water. You know? I am a traditional gardener. I love being outside and messing with my plants and checking on everybody. And I truly love each and every one of my flowers and my trees and my plants in my yard. I have 2.5 acres. And, but I know exactly how much water everyone's getting. And I forgot where I was going with this. My mind goes 1,000 miles an hour. But,
Soil.
Soil. Yeah.
So native soil.
Yeah, my water spreads out perfectly. I can take and put 3 emitters on there, and I can get a ball of water this big on my trees. Some of this, I've dug and dug in the soil. I found worms, I found rocks, found a nail a few times. You know, there's all sorts of little micro guys in there and stuff. I have never found a perlite. I mean, you know, who invented that dude? The perlite dudes are making a mint. You know, oh, well, no, that's supposed to take and retain water. Not when it gets that hot. And gravity's taking it down. Plus your plant's intaking it. They're saying for the air and stuff like that. Well, if you don't overwater, you're not having that air problem. We brought up about check valves, one-way valves. They make 2 different kinds. They make a spring one. They come in brass or stainless steel or whatever. But they have this cool little spring in there. And it's generally a one-way valve when you're trying to keep water from coming back. You see them in your wells. There's always one in the top of the pump that's built in, and then they put one up at the top of the well. Or if you have a deep well set, they'll stick them every couple of 100 feet. And that's basically to take the pressure off of the pump when it fires up so it doesn't have all this weight of the water on it. The pump will last longer. I use them in systems. If my well is here and we got to take and pump water up the hill, I always make sure there's one here so that when there is a problem with the well, that not all that whole line's going to take and drain out and have a big mud hole where you got to work and not waste all that water. I really look at filters, that sort of thing. If my filter's here, watering up here, same thing. I make sure that there's a valve or a check valve there or something to lock all that water into the system. It's shocking to come. I go to a zillion grows, and you go out there and you can see where they've been changing their filter because they didn't want to spend $8 and stick a valve in there and shut the water off. They're wasting thousands of gallons. And like you said, when you got to start accounting for every drop, you can't have that. You can't say, well, you know, my garden takes 2,000 gallons a week, but my filter takes 400. They're going to look at you funny. And then the swing. He's got a little baffle in him. He works the best when he's vertically. He don't work so good this way. The slightest little thing will get in there and then he's stuck open and he's useless. He's a glued piece of plastic in your system. Now, when I design a system, believe it or not, I work backwards. I take and I figure out how much, a lot of guys, especially this year, everyone's into the monster plants. It went from, small pots into the smart pots, then everyone was 100s, 200s, and then it got to 400s and 600s. Now it's these monster beds that, I need a 10 by 10 area that I'm wetting and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. Going, okay, so we're gonna have to put lawn sprinklers out here to take and water all this stuff. The biggest thing that I fight is that all of these products are set up for residential landscape watering. No one's gone out there, because I go to the National Irrigation Show every year and say, hey, let's talk about the cannabis industry. And unfortunately, they're all older gentlemen. They're the suits of the gentlemen of all these different companies. They don't want to talk to me about cannabis. The guy from Toro. It took me years. Guy from Netafim. All of these guys. These are all the big players. Same thing, diaphragm pumps. I was asking about diaphragm pumps. This is every well company in the world there. And it was like I was at an owl convention. Who? What? Come on, guys. You don't know what a diaphragm pump is? SureFlow has cornered the market in that, but you got to remember those pumps are made for trailers and not watering cannabis. So that makes it no fun. This is the other. When you buy a pump, it's either or. You always look at the PSI. It'll say, this pump is 45 PSI or 6 gallons a minute, especially on the little ones. It's either or. It'll produce 45 PSI, but that's only going to give you a couple of gallons a minute. It's not going to give you 45 PSI and 6 gallons a minute. This doesn't work that way. So you really got to watch, and they all have these cool little graphs. Make sure you're in the middle of the graph. As your pump starts to wear, your system's still going to work. If you're on the top side of the graph, your pump starts to wear, your system doesn't work anymore. So now we've got a failed system. Let's talk emitters a little bit. We've all seen sprinkler on a stake. Not one of my favorites. Never will be one of my favorites. The ones that set out the little streams, 10 gallons an hour. The ones that mushroom out and bubble, 20 gallons an hour. So guys go, oh yeah, I got 6 of them around each time. Okay, so you need 120 gallons there, and no way to count how much water comes out of these. They've all run into the same thing. All the companies that mass produce these, their equipment is old. I went through this on a strawberry farm. Lady comes in, I don't know if you've seen them, they have these cool strawberry things that stack. Well, she bought like 4,000 of them. And they say to take and put one of these in the top of all 4,000 of these, and it will bubble down and feed all the strawberries. And it's 1 gallon per almond. It's 4 strawberries is a gallon of water. Yeah, sucks, huh? But, so it used to be that they have a little triangle here on one of the little blades. And there's a number up top, or they would click, and you could just open them up, and the spread of the water at a certain PSI would tell me how many gallons per minute I got. Okay, cool. Well, I go over there, because I am who I am, and I start checking a bunch of them. Okay, this one's on 6 already. Oh, well, let's spin the cap off, try it on again. There was no way to regulate how much water was coming out of it. And so I called the company. And then I got some from Rainbird, and then I got some from Toro, checked the same thing, call those. Yeah, our equipment's old and it's not as accurate as it used to be. So, I'm sure there's a spot in your journal for that, but no. This is actually sort of becoming my fan favorite, is the emitter tubing. The reason that I like it is it's very simple to count gallons. Now, the 1/4 inch is PSI based. That means that you have to know what your operating pressure is to know exactly how much water is coming out of here. The 1/2 inch stuff, most of them from 10 PSI to 40 PSI will all drip the same. Now, this I only use on 100-gallon pots and smaller, because I can only take and string this out about 15 linear feet before it doesn't start dripping the same. I had a guy 2 weeks ago that's going, oh yeah, I'm throwing down 50 linear feet of this on every pot. I go, well, why don't you throw the other 35 feet away because it's useless. Oh, no, dude, this works. My buddy does it all the time. You don't want to argue with them because someplace, somewhere, some customer said that the customer's always right. He's wrong. I've experimented with this. I have a beautiful section that's 15 by 15 of creeping Jenny that this is buried in the ground, and I have no problems with it, 12 inches on center. On a 1/2 inch line, you can only have 200 linear feet of this because it exceeds, there's a certain gallonage for every size pipe. If I have half inch, you don't want to design any more than 5 gallons a minute because the friction loss is too high. The water slows down, there's nothing to drive it. Where was I? So you really got to know what's happening with this stuff. The half-inch stuff, along with this, to my knowledge, Netafim has come out with they have one line of it in their 17 millimeter line, and Toro has one on the ag side, which is real hard to get, that doesn't have copper oxide in the emitter. And it's for root intrusion. They're trying to deter the roots. Well, if you're growing cannabis, that's not going to work out so well for you. So if you get it from Rainbird or Netafim, if you pick this up, ask them. And if the dude can't tell you, politely put it back on the shelf and go someplace else where the guy can answer your question. I've seen a lot of these. These are my landscaper's favorite. They're $19 for 100. They're little flag emitters. Most people think that the little flag on top, ooh, look, I can turn it off. I mean, you're not turning anything off. It's meant to come apart because it's meant for sandy water. So that's all it. And I have the perfect display at my shop. In front of my showroom, I've got a 70-foot boxwood hedge that a licensed landscaper put in, and I got a wedge. Hasn't quite grown into a hedge yet, but it's a wedge. Water starts here, the plants are nice, and then they just keep getting smaller. Okay, well, in the cannabis industry, you put just as much work into that small plant that isn't going to give you much reward as you do into your big dogs over here. You should, when you look back at your garden, everyone should be that same height, all the way down the line. So really not a fan of these. And you got to go short runs or center feed your line to make it work properly. If you're trying to end feed and go 100 feet, guaranteed that the first guys are going to have way more water than what's down at the other end. What else? We talked about filters. You know, this is these guys are actually your friends. They're called unions. And what they allow you to do is take parts that more than likely are going to fail, like your ball valves or your check valves or something. So when you build a system, when I build my valve assembly, I build it because I know that more than likely that someone's going to snap that handle off. Well, I have one of these in, $3.50. I unscrew it. Got a little O-ring in it. I unscrew it. Now I can unthread the valve assembly and just take and replace that one part. But no one wants to use them. The landscape, oh no, my customer won't pay for that. Oh, okay, cool. So that means when I used to go out and do it, that I was coming in and I was cutting and hacking on both ends because there was no way to replace it, and taking perfectly good parts and throwing them in the landfill because no one wanted to spend $3.50. Same thing, I didn't bring an anti-siphon valve, but he looks similar to the backflow preventer. He goes above the ground. When I could come out and sit on my 5-gallon bucket and replace your stuff, you got the killer bro deal. These inline valves usually go down on the ground because, ooh, no one wants to see them, that sort of thing. I go out there, they're usually smashed into a box where there's no room to work, and I know I got to dig all this up. I'm adding zeros. It's just the way that it is. My yard, I have 32 valves in it. I'll let you walk around and find them. I hit them around this plant, I hit them around there. You can hide them. But, you know, evidently Cher or anybody, the high-end people go, oh, I can't have that in my home. But, ball valves. 3 different types. There's more out there, but these are the most common. We've all seen them before. PVC ball valves are either slip or thread. I don't ever recommend gluing these in unless it's on a drain. If it's a drain, it's hardly ever, it gets turned every once in a while. It's always good to exercise your valves. Go turn them every once in a while because crap gets in them, you know, things build up. You see the inside of a pipe when you cut it. It's orange or brown in there or something. That stuff all builds in here and then it doesn't spin anymore. I always recommend that when you take a plastic ball valve that you grab it whole-handedly and not use your fingers. From the years of me doing it, both here and here on both hands, I have nice scars for this thing snapping off and just lacing your palm open. And it's gonna happen. It's not when, or if, it's when. But I recommend grab that thing, turn it, If it's, you can't budget, just start working it a little bit back and forth until it moves. They make the same thing in lead-free brass. Is this valve any better than this valve? Nope. Will this valve or this valve survive the cold any better? Nope. So it doesn't really make a difference which one you choose. It's about price. This one is half the price of the lead-free version.
But the lead-free one won't snap in your palm.
No.
Ah.
Yep. These are gate valves. They have a little gate in them. Everyone goes, oh, these things suck. The main line to my house was all put in the early 50s. I have 2 gate valves there. I go by, I exercise them periodically, they work killer. The reason that you use a gate valve is when you have high pressure, and I take this guy, and I snap him closed, and I stop that water real quick, now I'm creating water hammer. Boom, 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 you can hear your pipes, everything jostling around. So if I take this guy, he's gonna take me a minute to shut him off. I'm actually slowing that water down. And with most of the growers, all of the piping system is above the ground. I got a big one going in Davis, 430, 200 gallon pots. Same thing, guy, oh, we gotta have tons of pressure, tons of pressure. I sent all gate valves and he sent them back. So I'm going, okay, I have the conversation with him. He goes, oh, that doesn't happen. Goes out, buys 2-inch plastic valves, takes and shuts his system down the first time and it just starts blowing apart. Calls me back up and says, hey, can I get those gate valves? Yeah. I only suggest stuff if there's a reason for it. I don't want you to buy what you don't have to buy. That's no good for anybody. What else do I have in here? Let's talk, we've talked about, I work backwards in my system. I figure out how many gallons per minute I'm going to put down on each of my pots. That gets our runtime. That will size my lateral lines. So if I figure out that I've got 10 pots and I'm giving them each, that it works out to, it's a gallon per minute each one, that'll tell me what size pipe I have to run there. And then if I'm trying to, everyone wants, so we got to water everything at once. That's so much fun. I still build all my laterals with valves in them because that gives you control over it. If I just got one valve and it's on or off, you're not going to have any control over your system. Excuse me. So I will take and size my main line bigger if you want to run more. But the whole time I'm working backwards, the very last thing that I size is the pump. Because I'm taking all that information. I'm taking, okay, I need 40 PSI and I need 10 gallons a minute, 400 feet away. I take all of that and then I go, oh, look, oh, right there, there's the perfect pump. You ever go on Craigslist or eBay or any of those places that there's all those one-use pumps that are for sale? It's because people bought the pump first and then said, oh, okay, I'm building a garden. And then they hook it all up, turn the pump on, they're all excited. There's nothing worse. It's happened to me one time in my career. Unfortunately, it was just there was a valve shut off. You got everyone's there, you're all amped up, I'm all done, firing it up the system and bleh. Ooh, I'm checking this, I'm checking that, I'm checking this. I'm starting to get worried, I'm starting to get mad, and then you finally figure out that, ooh, I got the wrong size pump. Size it last with the information that you have. Don't drop your fertilizers or store them by your wells. My well's here, I'm going to drop my pile of soil, or I'm going to keep my compost pile here. When it rains and all that, it's just leaching down to your well. Get them off over parallel or off to the side, waddle around them, put them on a tarp. I like putting them on a tarp. Great way to do it. Also a great way to get rid of weeds too. In between your rows, instead of spraying, just leave the tarp there for a little bit and it suffocates them out and they're gone. Any questions or anything that you have happening in your own gardens that you want to talk about?
I'm interested in getting we have 2 greenhouses and they're 1,000 contiguous square feet, you know how to count or whatever, but basically one is like a giant rectangle, that would be the first irrigation stuff, the other one's on a slope and probably we need to just abandon altogether. But what would you recommend for, it's how far, it's 100 feet low. essentially.
Be the size of the poly.
Yeah, like what would be the
the
size of the
first
poly you
thing.
would use and what would be the emitter you would use, and I would still really.
How big are the pots?
It's in
It's
the ground, 1,000 square feet.
Oh, they're in the ground?
Yeah.
Is it bedded?
It's just
No.
native dirt.
It's
We
like-
just- We just haven't planted in
We
the
have
ground.
like decomposing granite and we
Mhm.
just mixed in some store soil with native soil, so it's about a 50-50 blend. And it's
Nice.
basically
Cover
in a
crop
big,
year after year.
yeah, it's
Nice.
been, I mean, we've been working for a decade, a long
Good for
time,
you.
But I'd like to get it irrigated so we're not sitting there holding a hose anymore, but I just don't know what.
You're not enjoying that?
Neither is anyone else, yeah. No.
You know, the best thing to do, snap off some pictures and bring in your measurements and tell me, you know, how far it is from here to here. And if you already have a line down there, maybe we can make that work and then size our laterals for that. I try to reuse as much as possible. I have guys come, oh, I've already got a line here, I know we'll have to get, no. I don't want any of that stuff going to the landfill, let's use it. And I also realize that this is a business for most people. It's how they make their livelihood. So I look at it as an operating cost. You know, we can't be replacing this every year or that every year, or, you know, throwing this away. I have guys that completely throw away their whole setup every year. Yeah, and that's the same thing. I say, well, why? There's nothing wrong with it. Oh, no, that water sat in it all winter long and it's contaminated. No, it ain't. It's no different than any other drip system. Fire it up, flush it out a little bit, now we're into fresh water and we're going again. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay to keep all of this stuff outside. Gray spray paint. Gray reflects UV. If you're going to have exposed PVC that isn't going to freeze or whatever, and it's in the sun, spray gray. It'll reflect it. It'll keep the petroleum inside the PVC product. What else? Controllers. They make power AC controllers, and they're coming out. These are pretty cool. They make DC operated controllers. I can control up to 6 valves with this on a couple of 9-volt batteries. The biggest thing that I recommend, and I say this with a lot of parts that I have, read the book. Everyone comes back, oh, you know, I couldn't figure it out. Well, did you read the book? Well, no. It's not optional reading if you want to learn how to take and use your controller right. I can do some amazing things with this. I can have multiple starts, I can cycle water, I can put well rest in, I can do all of these things just by reading the book and seeing what it does. I think that's sort of man law, especially because I work with a lot of men, and it's, oh, I don't need to read the book. That's the first thing you do when you open something up. That's the first thing you throw away. We don't need the book, we're men. Well, bad news. I was taught early on that if you read the book, you get to actually see what you bought and see how it works, and to go, oh man, this is pretty cool. You know, it's just like the pen. There's no directions on it, and I start looking at it and go, oh, this thing doesn't write. But if it came with, you look at the packaging, it says press the top. Now it's a pen, right on, score. So, that's about all I have. If you have any, I work at Sierra Plumbing, I'm there 4 days a week. Most of the time during my 4 months of hell, I'm there from 5 o'clock until about 4 o'clock in the evening. My phone rings off the hook until 9:30. I don't run and hide. If I design a system, or if you need troubleshooting, you can call me. Or if you're working at night, I understand the middle part of the days suck. You know, so you get up early, you bang out as much as you can, go hang out, go to the river, blah, 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 and then you're back to work. Okay, cool. You know what? I understand that. Tech support lives with me. I don't like to run and hide. I want to see you in the grocery store and say, hey, how's it going? Is your stuff still working? You know, are you having any problems? Blah, blah, blah. And I have guys that I've done a ton of work for, and it's all because of that. You know, oh yeah, I hired some other guy, and you know, and then I could never get a hold of him when this didn't work. That's not how you do things in a small town. I was born and raised here, worked my way up through here, and it's about knowing people and helping people out. And that's all I try to do.
So what days a week do you work again?
Monday through Thursday.
So 10 o'clock in the morning would be a good time to come in?
It's always a crapshoot for me. I have a line in front of my desk all day long. But yeah, anytime. Just come in and I make time to see everybody.
Have a picture of the
Pictures, some measurements, that sort of stuff. We were talking about rain capture earlier. I've done all kinds of setups with that. I've been around a long time, and between landscaping and construction, there's not too much I haven't seen. You were talking earlier about the berms and stuff that you guys are growing in with your permaculture. What I've found from years of dealing with inspectors, when they come out, if you can intelligently give them your argument and what you're doing and show them and prove, they'll sign it off. That's all you need. And unfortunately, what happens with inspectors, they find out that they don't like their job because of the hassle they get so much that they won't be there the next time. So be prepared to take and lay down what you got going and show them. Any intelligent person is going to look and say, oh, okay, I understand you're in this tier, that sort of thing. You know, hey, I love what you got going here. You got jute on here. We're protecting erosion. You've replanted it. I like to replant with wildflowers instead of just throwing grass seed and stuff out there. You know, give it a little color. Brings in all the beneficial insects. It's all good for that stuff. But yeah, I've done stuff where, like building this arch and stuff with the inspector. Oh, John, that's never going to fly. And you start talking to him and tell him what your theory is and how you went about it and everything. He goes, oh, all right, cool, I understand that. Cool, where's your card? And he signs it off. And be nice. Those guys are so used to everyone being a jerk to them that no one's ever nice anymore. A perfect example of this, I did 3 fire protection setups for 3 houses in a row. They all sold within months of each other. This guy was adding on. I told him how to go about with the fire department, where to place, ask them where to place the tank and what the hookup can be and all that stuff. And I go, have your wife bake him some cookies. Be nice to him. Guy signs his card off. Yeah, you know, go right here. You can use 2.5-inch PVC custom with the tank and everything, about $1,200. So middle house hadn't sold yet. Someone came and buys this house. Went through the same process, told them how to go about it. And they're going, oh yeah, hey, cool, same setup, $1,200. The lady here in the middle decides not to be nice. And was, oh, I don't want that on my property, and you got blah, blah, blah. Made her do it all out of 4-inch galbi. She had 4 fittings that were $320 a piece. Be nice. Okay, any questions? Thank you guys for coming too. I appreciate, for us. He drove forever. He was in Guam earlier, and he made it here today to talk to everybody. And for you 3 to show up, and the cameraman, and for you to put it on, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.